Hey, welcome Broker Nation. It's Loren Hawkins here once again from 3 Point Capital, and I am happy to be with the team at Lawrenson Walker yet again for another roundtable. We're going to discuss, what happened last year, some forecasts for next year and this year, and a few other topics that have come up over conversations that I've had with our network across the country. So welcome and Happy New Year, everyone.
Thanks, Loren.
Thanks
Good
for
to be
having
here.
us.
Thanks.
Welcome. I'm guessing the beginning of this year has started off like the end of last year did. And I mean, the market is just continually to move full steam ahead. Feels like spring market has come early and fall market didn't stop. So let's just kind of start right with that of, how was 2021 for your team in each of the markets that you service?
So I service, or I'm the president of the company. We also, Derek is in the Okanagan and Chantelle is in Alberta. So each is a little different, but I'll just speak to Greater Vancouver and the island. We didn't expect the prices to increase what they did. I don't think anybody did. But I think the story of 2021 for us, 2021 for us is the exodus of people from the urban centers into the suburbs, the people away from the lower mainland into the interior and the Okanagan and beyond. That's a really big story. I mean, you're seeing huge increases in the 40% range for Hope, which we never experienced. Chilliwack being one of the hottest areas in the province. Who would have expected? I think, like you said, Loren, we certainly have started 2022 off with a bang. I think we had a couple of weeks of lull there while people sort of, got back into the swing of things after the holidays, but it's full steam ahead right now. And if this is where we are today in the, after the first week of February, I think we're going to be run off our feet again come April. So we're trying to retool the office. We're hiring new people in the front office. We're trying to get people trained up just so that we can run efficiently. We don't want to get left flat-footed, perhaps like we were in mid-pandemic. We're just trying to, all the signs are there for a busy spring. So we want to retool to make sure we're ready for it.
Yeah. And talking about sort of pandemic, how have things changed through, going through the pandemic and, kind of getting through that first sort of 12 months of it? We saw a modification on how lenders would accept deals or reports from appraiser firms. Has that changed a bit? Have you been going back into the homes, or is it a hybrid of both? Some people still not sure about, whether they should let, people they don't know into their properties. Like, has that changed much?
Those are called virtual inspections, and that's where the appraiser doesn't actually go into the interior of the property. They still will visit the exterior, but through technology, we'll gather the information on the inside. And so we've actually developed some software that helps us do that with the occupant. But over through the course of COVID, I would say that it went from most of the appraisals being done virtually to now most of the appraisers are still going back in. Very, very few virtual inspections are taking place now. However, it's still a tool that we can use when required. I mean, we're doing one today where the homeowner just is not comfortable having anyone in their house.
Fair enough, right?
But we will only use that tool if it's COVID related. If you tell us because you just can't, you can't let us in because you don't want us in there, that tool can only be used for COVID. So it's a slippery slope. I don't want us to come out of COVID and appraisers not be going into homes anymore. How is that? It's a little bit different in Calgary and in the Okanagan for sure.
Yes, good segue. Go over to those two areas.
Yeah, so I can talk to Alberta. That's where I'm managing. And just looking back at 2021, it was just such a shock, really, to see what was happening and to see the prices going up. I remember having this conversation with you right as COVID was, I think, starting. And I was being pretty hard on Alberta and like, oh, we're doomed. And what's going to happen to the market? We were all really nervous, but no, 2021 was great. We saw, I think, on average, about an 11% increase on prices, which in Alberta is unheard of. We haven't seen, much of a inflation over the last 10 at least 10 years. So everyone got excited, everybody put their house on the market, everybody wanted to finally sell at the price that they were thought their homes should be sold at. But then now what's happened is we're getting into 2022 and we have no inventory. And I think that is across the country is a lack of inventory problem. But it's putting really a lot of pressure in Alberta on the prices. So not only are people panicking because they're starting to see the prices go up at quite a rapid rate, so that, if they're wanting to be a homeowner or buy a second property, they feel a bit of panic to do so. But we're also seeing residents from BC and Ontario, that maybe have gone remote for work, looking at Alberta, still an affordable place to live, moving into Alberta. So there's, additional buyers on the market, as well as investors are looking at Alberta as, hey, maybe this is where we should be putting our money. So, the second week of January just went nuts, and we're seeing multiple offer situations, pretty much the norm now. Prices over list by at least 10%. So yeah, it's an exciting time for Alberta. I have to say, I'm excited about it. It's making us work a bit harder as appraisers. It makes it challenging, but luckily we have the BC guys to kind of deflect to and say, hey, what have you done in the last decade?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, obviously, the Alberta market has been, hot and heavy on the news here and there. And I mean, the last report I saw was a new development coming out somewhere in Calgary, and it was lots, and they were only releasing 3 lots, and they had a lineup of like 90 people, and the first 3 people went in, go, yep, it was gone. And, I don't think Alberta's seen that kind of demand for quite a few years. I experienced that in the fall. I was out in Ontario and meeting with a broker, and they were doing the same thing. They actually had to take a call from a sales team because they got their name drawn for a lot. So I said, yeah, please. And he negotiated the lot right then and there in front of me. And he says, if I didn't take that call, my wife and I have been waiting 5 years to get a lot in this area. And he said, by me just saying yes, I've already made like 50 grand on that lot within a couple of minutes because the demand is so high. So, I mean, it was nice to see, that happened in Alberta, because, not only the COVID's, hit your province. I mean, you guys have been dealing with numerous things over the years. So nice to see that little turnaround for you guys.
What I think is particularly interesting about that is that if you're in Alberta and you use your example, those 3 lots that came available in the subdivision, if you look behind those houses, all you see is land for as far as you can possibly see. Yeah. So in BC, the reason why we have lack of supply is because there isn't any land. So everything just gets jacked up and pressurized. But in Alberta, it's not the lack of land. Chantelle was telling me the other day, it's the lack of people and supplies to build the houses.
Yeah, and so very common in the outsides of Calgary is new builds, and it's market in its own, but the developers are only allowing the builders to sell like 4 lots per month, just because they don't want to get too behind in the construction timelines. So yeah, that's also just another restriction on the supply, is having the developers limit what these builders can sell.
It's crazy. I mean, I was saying to a colleague the other day, if I was showing up for that lot sale and I saw more than 3 people in front of me, I'd turn around, I'd leave. I mean, some of the stuff, I'm following a Royal LePage broker in Vancouver, and she's, posting her trials and tribulations of trying to find a house for her clients. And it's just crazy what's continuing to go on. And, Derek, I mean, you and I are both in the Okanagan here, and, nothing's really changing up here. I mean, what have you seen over the last 12 months?
It definitely hasn't stopped. It's been an extremely busy year. I don't think people predicted the prices to increase like they did. And it just didn't stop. And, going into 2022, it's been a very busy January already. Typically January is one of our, it's a slower month, but not this January. So I think the market's going to keep going, and it's just, there's so much demand. Like, there's just nothing listed out there. There's no supply, and people are moving to the Okanagan now. And it's not just the central Okanagan, it's the North Okanagan, the South Okanagan, the smaller towns like Okanagan Falls. People are buying lots out there now, and they're not cheap anymore either. It's and Peachland's up about 39% from last year, I believe. So,
Wow.
No one thought Little Peachland would, have price increases of like that type of land values now.
Yeah, I mean, like Leigh mentioned about land in, scarce in the lower mainland. I mean, Peachland's a prime example. I mean, there's not a lot of dirt to build on, and anything that's available, you're dealing with, rock or side of a mountainside, and that brings in drilling and all kinds of other stuff that a lot of people just don't want to look at, right? So that's a big increase for those people down Peachland there.
I've
Great
also
time to
noticed a
sell.
lot of
Yeah, exactly. But then where do you go?
Mexico.
Mexico. Yes.
Cash out.
Cash out and head to Mexico.
You can
Yeah.
teleport or whatever.
Yeah. So, I mean, having said, a big hot year that we've just come from, and, the beginning of this year is no different. I mean, other than the date change, it doesn't feel like anything has changed. What are you forecasting? How is Lawrenson Walker forecasting 2022? Like, what are you guys talking about? And what are you seeing so far?
I think more of the same, just lack of supply, prices increasing. I'll use the term, prices will increase, but at a decreasing rate. So I don't think, first of all, we never predicted 30 to 40% increases anywhere. So I think this year, certainly not going to predict that, but we've been surprised before, right? Think about over the last decade, how many times we've said it can't possibly get any busier or any higher in values. And sure enough, the following year, there's a giant increase. So I just think there's going to be lots of pressure going into the spring. And unless a lot of people, the last thing that I read the other day, which I think is going to be interesting, is what happens when these businesses in the urban centers want people to come back to work.
Right.
What happens then? So do we start seeing, prices go up in the cities and then people selling in the suburbs? I don't know, but the article that I was reading was predicting that would have an effect on suburban real estate, but I don't know.
Yeah, and we've seen a bit of that in in our Ontario market, where everybody exited the downtown core. House prices went skyrocketing. As far as Windsor, and things have changed. And again, employers are saying, okay, great. This was a lull. We do expect everybody to sort of come back. Maybe it's on a part-time basis, 3 days in the office, 2 days at home. And then all of a sudden now we're starting to see, through our connections, prices being affected, positively again downtown where people were leaving, right? So, some of my colleagues and friends that are out there, the commercial side hasn't slowed down at all either. Some of the companies friends are working for, they're buying up stuff right now because for expansion. And that's sort of one of the questions that came in was, are you guys looking to expand your service area, or are you guys sort of tapped out with personnel, and expansion 2022 isn't on the table?
So expansion is always on the table in the sense that, opportunities do present themselves to acquire appraisal firms across the country. Mm-hmm. We are open to that. There is a shortage of appraisers, not very many new people entering into the appraisal field. And we're in a situation where there's lots of appraisal firm owners who are approaching that retirement age. And so there's going to be a lot of opportunities for acquisitions and transitions. But we would love to be in the interior, sort of more towards the Kamloops area. Yeah. But we don't want to run those areas remotely. We want to be able to have good boots on the ground. So that's really what it comes down to. But we're looking for opportunities whenever they come up. So I expect this year we'll be in new areas this year for 2022 for sure.
Awesome. Kind of one one topic that kind of feeds into another. Any new housing trends that you've seen over the last 12, 24 months that have been of note, and things that just kind of pop up and kind of taking you off guard or anything like that?
I know of one, but I'll let Chantelle just to discuss it regarding the excess office space in downtown and going into condos.
Yeah, so Calgary has, I think everybody is aware, but excessive vacant commercial space.
Yeah.
So there is the talk, and has been for a few years, of converting that commercial space into residential living.
Yeah.
Now it's a tough one, and I've listened to a lot of talks on this, because the controversy is, well, do we even need more condos in Calgary? Condos have suffered the most of all residential properties, and still, even with the increasing market that we've seen, they're definitely slower to see that increase. So it'll be interesting to see the cost to do it and everything that would be required to make that happen. We haven't seen that happening yet. They are doing like restaurants and things like that, you know, kind of getting creative and out of the box, trying to use that space. But yeah, we'll see. It'll be interesting to watch. I mean, if the market continues the way it is, and maybe there will be get creative and create a product that would be attractive to somebody working or wanting to live in the inner city. But yeah, I think other than that, I mean, here, other than, you know, we are facing a challenging market in terms of appraising it. So we're having, as appraisers, to keep a real close eye on what is going on. You know, the comparables that we use have to be the very most recent comparables we can find, because they're the direct reflection of what's happening this week, because it's different than what was happening last week. And I think that's going to be, you know, the toughest part of 2022 for us, is just making sure that we're dealing with the trend of the moment.
Right. I mean, that might help the economy downtown Calgary of creating some more livable space close to employers. You know, might help both ways, right? So people saying, yeah, I want to live downtown, you know, I'm now taking a job with, you know, XYZ company, they're a couple blocks away, and it might shift that outlook of what's going on in downtown Calgary. Because I mean,
And the economy is changing
suffered
in Calgary. Yeah. We've had it tough in Alberta just in general. The economy is picking up, and oil and gas is really picking up. So with everything moving in that direction, I think there's definitely some good that could come from creating more livable space.
Right. And Derek, anything new in the Okanagan?
I've noticed a lot of developers buying land up here, especially in the Rutland area, where, you know, multifamily is going to be built there, and they're just paying huge money for these lots now. You know, it's unbelievable how much, you know, some of the duplex houses are going for, banking on that it will be rezoned to multifamily.
Yeah,
I've noticed a lot of that lately. You know, in the RU7 lots in the, you know, the downtown Kelowna area there's huge demand for that. The lots used to be, you know, earlier in the year, if it was you know, you could put a fourplex on it, was less than $1 million, and now they're going for upwards of 1.5.
Yeah,
for those lots.
It's definitely interesting here. You know, I live in West Kelowna, and so going across, you know, the bridge a couple days, keeping an eye out on the new development just around the corner on Campbell Road there. I mean, that's slated for, you know, over 100 or 150 units there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and some of the towers still continuing to go up in the downtown core. It's got what's the new development, water park or
Mm-hmm.
or something like that's happening in the Leon area. I mean, they're starting to take down those buildings now to start that first phase. So, you know, definitely that more multifamily in the Okanagan, I'm finding this is a big trend right now.
It is big time. Yeah.
We're
Big
seeing
demand for it.
in the Lower Mainland, certainly. I could speak to some concerns that I have regarding pre-sale condos, pre-sale strata apartments and townhomes that are being completed now, and some concerns that they might not be reaching their pre-construction contract prices. That's always been the case in the pre-sale world, but I think we've come across a few that are surprisingly oversold in terms of their contract prices. And even that's even more strange given that where we are in the market right now. How could something that was sold in 2019 be not worth that price today? But it is happening. It usually happens within the same group of buildings,
Right.
And it says more about when they were sold, those types of contracts that were written, versus it does the market. I don't think the market's come down on them, but you just need to be careful with those contracts. So there are going to be cases where brokers and lenders are going to come across those, and they are out there. The other thing is we're seeing really creative, we all know buyer incentives, decorating allowances, trips to Vegas, and cars in the driveway, all those types of things. We're starting to see some very, very creative buyer incentives that some developers are using in BC and Alberta, where you really need to sit down. And it used to be just a one-line clause on the addendum of a purchase contract that said what it was. Now that one line refers to another document, an appendix, and then that's an 11-page document that when you actually have to sit down and figure it out, it's actually a cashback of $70,000. And so we have to sort of decipher it. But I've seen some that are written almost intentionally confusing so that it's hard to figure out what's actually happening.
Right.
So
which
watch for those.
Yeah, which causes a whole other wave of issues, when it just takes one lender to figure out how that's reading, and then now how that affects the actual price of the unit, right? So we all know, you see that kind of incentive, all of a sudden that now takes a chunk out of the purchase price, and buyers are left holding the bag, coming up with that additional down payment to get to a value that a lender is going to accept.
There's a ripple effect that I think we always need to be mindful of, is that when we look on MLS, let's say for example there's a purchase price of $1 million, but there's a buyer incentive hidden in there of $100,000. MLS is going to show that sold at $1 million.
Right.
So that ripples down every time an appraiser or a realtor, whoever, uses that sale as a comparable for future transactions and appraisals. It's going to be polluted. Let's just say that data isn't actually accurate. So mindful that buyers, appraisers, realtors, brokers, everyone needs to be careful of those, and just dig deeper on anything that's sold by a developer that you see as a comparable. You have to dig deeper and find out exactly what the purchase price was.
And that brings up a good topic. I had another question that kind of came into me as well. When you're looking at comparables, how do you select the ones that you're going to use? Because just into that point there, I mean, you may not, even though that may be a sale within a development or within an area of a subject property, it might not be a comparable you want to use, because you have that back information that kind of skews that sale price.
Well, we have, and I'm going to turn this over to Chantelle in a sec, but I'll just make one point. We have an internal policy at Lawrenson Walker where we will not use developer sales for comparables, whether they're on MLS or otherwise,
right?
Because that is, we no longer, and have for a number of years, we don't consider that a reliable source of comparable sales information for a number of reasons. I go back to, I could think of so many sort of funky things that were going on with reporting of sale prices dating back to 2010. When the market changed going after the Olympics a little bit, developers were coming up with all sorts of things. So we just simply don't use developer sales anymore. We will use resales, meaning someone's bought it from the developer who is now reselling it again. That's considered a fair market transaction. But when there's the developer involved, sometimes it's a little bit tainted. But in this market, it is tough to find comparables. And I'll let Chantelle talk about how some of the tricks that we have to use to get comparables now.
Yeah. So I think, I had mentioned that we're trying to use the most recent comparables in an increasing market. It's moving as quickly as it is. So obviously that's going to be important, is when did that sale happen? But I think just in general, the best comparables are the ones that a buyer would consider when they're going through the buying process. So if you're looking at this property, would the comparables you're using be something that that buyer would have considered? The location, or does it have a unique feature? Does it have an income helper? There's going to be something about that property that you want to make sure that's captured in the comparables. If there's not the perfect comparables that all have those different features or that same feature as your property, then you want to try to capture the different features in each comparable. So maybe one has an income helper, maybe one has the same view, and maybe one was a very recent comparable, but maybe differs in other ways. But that gives the appraiser the best kind of overall picture to come up with the value. But I think also area is really important, especially in Alberta, because we do have so many different types of communities, not that far from each other.
Right.
So we try to stick together with buyers typically looking in a specific community for whatever reason. There's different features for different communities. Even if the houses are the same age, builder, you would think should be comparable. A lot of the times it's kind of just this unspoken knowledge that we know that they're looking because that community has a lake, or they have this specific access to Fish Creek Park, that buyer only wants to be looking in that area. So it's not always just the type of house, size of house, quality of build. There's usually a lot of other things that are going on in a buyer's mind, and when they're making just doing the hunt, first of all, for buying a property. So each market kind of determines their own market within Calgary.
We like to, I harp on our appraisers when we do our appraiser meetings, when we talk about comparables, and this is the time when the comparables are scarce and the market's moving rapidly upward or downward, but in this case, it's moving rapidly upward. When it's oftentimes, if an appraiser is solely relying on comparable sales, they're going to fall short every time. And so I want to make sure our appraisers are pragmatic and realize that comparables are important, but they're one tool in the appraiser's toolbox. They have a lot of other tools that they could use to determine what the value is. And sometimes that comes down to picking up the phone and calling the realtors in that marketplace.
Yeah.
What were the transactions on this comparable? What were the transactions on the subject? How many showings have you had? Oftentimes we'll call a realtor and we'll learn that a purchase has 3 backup offers or something like that. And appraisers need to be pragmatic and use what we call the reasonable appraiser approach. And does this make sense? Even though the comparables are pointing in one direction, does this make sense? And oftentimes the test is, and we do this all the time. I know I talk to Derek and Chantelle about this regularly, which is if we're appraising a purchase and the comparables aren't quite getting us there, we're not reaching the purchase price. After we've contacted the realtor and we've spoken to them and tried to, dig deeper, if this property were to go back on the market tomorrow, is it reasonable to expect that they'd get the same purchase price?
Right.
If the answer is yes, that's market value. And you need to go back as an appraiser and just put some more thought into the assignment. If the answer is no, and you know that it's not likely that they're going to be able to achieve that purchase price, it was a one-off, then perhaps it's maybe the purchase price is in excess of market value, but it's requiring us to do a number of other steps that you might not have to do in a regular balanced market.
Right.
And also just taking a look what else is out there, right? What's
Yeah.
listed, if you look at a building, there's 5 listings and you're not reaching the sale price. Well, there's maybe an issue with that sale price, right? But if there hasn't been any sales in there's no actives around, well, there's a good chance that, the condo would sell for what it's selling for in today's market.
I know we're having to answer to lenders more and more. So we'll put a value on the property and we know that we're going to get a call back immediately from a lender and just say, explain this to me because it doesn't look right. And the answer is usually, we feel the same way as you do, but the market is telling us that it is worth that.
Exactly. So I've got a couple more questions that have come in and they kind of, I think, go a little bit hand in hand. And maybe Derek, you can start us off here. I mean, obviously the market's been crazy, and everybody has recently got their assessments for this year. And like myself, our assessment was quite high. How does that affect the appraisal process for you guys? I know it's questions that I hear, at industry events or, just around the coffee table, so maybe you can advise everybody how they affect your job, or do they?
Well, to be honest, they don't really affect our job too much. It's the assessments are based on basically a pool of, similar homes. They don't know what actually the inside looks like, if it had a $250,000 renovation done, or if it hasn't been well taken care of, right? So, it's very challenging to base any and put any, weight on an assessed value. But
Yeah.
one thing is that, the assessed values have come up quite a bit from last year, obviously, upwards of a few $100,000 on a lot of properties. But so has the market too. So I think the assessed values are definitely closer to the market value now of most homes I've been seeing. They're not as far apart anymore. But they've definitely increased, and so has the market. So typically when the assessments drop, the market's probably dropping with it as well. But I mean, we just looked at this one house not too long ago, and the improvement was assessed at almost $2 million, and the house was not well taken care of. But they had no idea that it was, they were attributing a lot of value to this home just because based on the year, but
Yeah.
the home itself was not well taken care of. So, I mean, the assessments can be very misleading. So we don't really, like I said, put too much weight on those values. We do look at them, but we don't really pay too much attention to them.
Right. Good information for everybody out there. Then the other kind of question that also come up and was more of, people looking to possibly build, kind of interested in, maybe the house trend in some respects. Are there things that you would advise people that add additional value, and things that may detract from values when people are looking at building? Some things, no, just don't do because it's a fad or it's too personalized, or are the things that you see across the markets?
I think, we hear the question a lot, what adds the most value to a property? Is it the kitchen? Is it the bathroom? What is it? What I can say to that is it's not necessarily a kitchen. It's not necessarily a bathroom, or it depends on what that particular house needs.
Right.
So we've seen cases where it's a brand new house, but someone doesn't like the color of the cabinets or the granite countertop. So they spend $100,000 renovating the kitchen, and that probably adds zero value. Same with the bathroom. If it doesn't need it, then someone does it, then it doesn't really add value. So look at what the house needs. If it needs a coat of paint, it needs a cleanup, I find that the best bang for your buck is cleaning and paint. But if the house needs a roof, don't renovate the kitchen. If it needs a kitchen, don't put a new roof on it.
Right, yeah.
It depends on each property. And we get, I've seen, surveys and whatnot completed with, what the realtors will often put that out there, the best increases in value. So again, I always say it comes back to the property itself.
I would maybe add to that is just, I do see sometimes people go quite trendy with their renovation, or even just their new build design. And those are some things that might actually deter from value in the future. If it's a 5-year trend and you're trying to sell, in 6 or 7 years, everybody's going to be avoiding that house because of it's now outdated, yet not old, not really, requiring an update, but it's going to end up being that house that has the blue walls or kitchen or floor or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, and that's fine. I mean, if you're building or renovating for you and your taste, that's another thing. But you have to also realize when you come to sell, was it a trend like you mentioned? And is it going to appeal to everybody? Because obviously the more out there or more personalized approach you've taken just really shrinks the marketability of that property and the pool of buyers that you have to draw from. And I'm going to wrap this up. with the last question that kind of came in. What is the oddest and or funniest thing you have come across in reviewing a property?
Where do we start? You can only imagine the type of things that we get to see.
Oh, I know what I've seen in my career, which have been quite something, but I'm interested to hear what you guys have seen.
Well, I've had a situation where this one just stands out as the lady, the homeowner was in a wheelchair, and fine, we went through the interior inspection and she followed me through and everything was as per usual. But then she insisted on coming outside to follow me to watch me measure the exterior of the property. And there was a foot of snow on the ground. So, I mean, we start measuring and she's stuck in the snow and asked me to help her get out of the snow in her wheelchair. So just an odd situation I never thought I'd be presented with, but memorable, I guess.
Yeah. What about you, Derek?
Well, it's always kind of startling when you open up a bathroom door and someone's in there doing their thing. And it's a little shocking sometimes when you don't expect someone to be in the bathroom, but you see someone in there. It's always a bit, yeah, not something you really want to see, especially someone that you don't know.
Exactly. Exactly. All right, that's up there with mine.
I've seen a lot, and I guess really the highlights I would say are, I mean, I've seen a lot of grow ops over the years, a lot of booby trapped grow ops with like trap doors and Indiana Jones, what do you call it? Trolleys going and leading up into in a tunnel that goes up to the barn kind of thing. We see a lot of that.
Wow.
Surprisingly, a lot of that kind of stuff.
So I was thinking about that as I was filtering through some questions I'd gotten. What do you do? What do you do when you come across that? Because that was one of the questions that had come in. What do you do if you don't know?
Personal safety first. I mean, I tell all of our appraisers if you come across something that is, like I came across one where there's a handgun on the table and a stack of cash, you back out carefully and you get in your car and you go. If you walk into, you never know what you're walking into on these properties, right? And sometimes, as we were talking with Chantelle and Derek before, some of these places are outside a cell service area too. So you're really on your own out in the world. And so you have to be careful. I mean, I think the first week that I became an appraiser, mid-90s, I was sent to a property in Port Coquitlam, and it was an acreage. And I was informed by the credit union that the owner was a little bit strange and the property was a pig farm. And so I went out to that property, and a couple of years later, the news came out and that was the site of, I think we all know.
Mm-hmm.
But I do recall that one in very particular, being at that property and just feeling really uncomfortable. And I actually never did complete the appraisal. I got out of there. Just your spidey senses go up, and I never did complete the appraisal. And I wasn't really sure why then, but I think 3 years later, when we heard what was going on in the news, I was sure glad that I didn't pursue that. I guess the one insightful thing I've learned is being an appraiser and going into people's homes, that the larger the house doesn't necessarily mean the happier people. Yeah. Often see the happiest families sitting around the table in the smallest, modest house. And I've seen a lot of really expensive homes with a lot of unhappy people in them. So that was just a really good lesson for me to, the importance of what we think is important is not necessarily how big the house is. The small house, everyone closer around the dining room table is probably a better thing in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I truly agree with that comment there. Well, I truly appreciate your time. I had lots of positive feedback on our roundtable last year. Hopefully we could make this sort of an annual event. For us at 3 Point, we truly appreciate your partnership. Anytime that we've had questions, it's just been pick up the phone, questions are answered, gives us that comfort in, those questions that we may have from you. So anybody out there in Alberta, BC, they're looking for an appraisal firm, highly recommend our partners at Lawrenson Walker. Reach out to them. Their team is fantastic. And again, thank you guys for taking some time out your day to do this with me. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you, Loren.
for having
Thanks
us.
so much.
All righty. Take care, everyone. Have a great week.
Take care. You too.